All right, everyone. How's everybody doing? This is Lawrence Brinson, chair of the NCAE Black Caucus, as well as president of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Association of Educators. I'm grateful that everybody could join us for our second community conversation, which revolves around mental health support for students during and after COVID, especially students of color. Last week, we had a great time, and we look forward to having one as well. I want to go ahead and briefly introduce our panelists, and then once I do this, they will go ahead and speak to their role and their viewpoint on mental health and support for our students. First, we have Randolph, counsel with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, Randolph Frierson, Nia Jones from the Black Mental Health Alliance, Mona Towns, director of the Crisis Services with Integrated Family Services, then Tammy Broadway, licensed clinical mental health counselor, National Alliance of Mental Illness, Charlotte. David Burton, doctor, senior clinical strategist for global wellness, and Dr. Loretta Massey will be speaking to us. And we're gonna let them go first, and then as they present, we'll save questions to the end. We'll answer as many as we can. And questions that go unanswered, we'll try our best to get back to you. So Randolph, we'll just start with you, from your viewpoint and mental health.
Good evening, and thank you, President Brinson and Chair of the Black Caucus NCAE, and to my fellow panelists. Mental health during COVID, post-COVID, and even pre-COVID, for African Americans, for students of color, have been really disproportionately addressed in the nation and in schools. And a lot of that has to do with funding and the decreased funding over the last 20 years for mental health support in those communities, or our communities, and in our schools. So there are challenges even before COVID. We saw an increase of mental health issues among teenagers, including suicide, anxiety, and depression. Those ills continue and was exacerbated by COVID-19. To address that, many school systems have gone, like Charlotte-Mecklenburg, have focused on making sure the social emotional wellness of our students are addressed. This is going to be, because of the lack of funding in those areas, a collaborative event with stakeholders in the community. Many times, even when you look at the stigma of mental health in minority communities, it's hard sometimes to get folk to admit, I have a health problem, but it's actually a mental health problem instead, just like your physical health, because of the stigma in those communities that's associated with it. So reaching out and making sure that staff in schools are culturally competent and that they're being restorative rather than punitive. Many times mental health issues display itself, the displays of the mental health issues is a violation of a code of conduct and manifests itself in the disciplinary arena with suspensions, or either was reading a report about how many, even nationwide, schools are looking at the misplacement of students of color because of their mental health needs not being addressed. And as I said, COVID-19 have not helped any. And of course, the landscape in America with the shooting of African-American men and that fear of even going out for many of our students of color. So these times are trying times, and trauma, not only with the pandemic in terms of health, and we know about those health disparities in those communities, especially when testing was available. They were the last to get testing, and they still are. And then most of the student parents, a lot of them are healthcare workers or in the service industry, because a lot of students of color, that's their parent livelihood. So which meant that they were even at greater risk of bringing it home if they contracted it early on. And I've heard of stories where that have actually occurred. So addressing the social and emotional needs of students is going to be paramount through everyone, through the community, with the assistance of school staff, and many school staff. Some are new, and they haven't had very much training. And that's one of the things that I know our district is doing to make sure that they've developed some modules to assist teachers in spotting, potential students that have unaddressed mental health needs, and then referring them to the appropriate counselor, school social worker. And we, of course, majority of things are virtual right now. So even in getting parents in contact with mental health professionals in the community, of course, there are disparities there, but doing our best to serve our students and maintain. And even after COVID, even after the pandemic subsides, the trauma for the students, and they absorb a lot from the parents and the community and society just in watching the news. So there are going to be a lot of mental health issues, and it's an incumbent upon our government to actually fund financial assistance to help meet the needs, or the growing needs, shall I say, for mental health with our students, and especially our students of color who have been disproportionately affected.
Thank you, Randy. We are so grateful to have Nia Jones with the Black Mental Health Alliance. And I'm just going to let her have the floor now as we continue this discussion.
Thank you. And thank you to Randy and to Lawrence and to all of you who are here today for your dedication to children of color. And so, as you can imagine, my name is Nia Jones. I am from the Black Mental Health Alliance for Education and Consultation Incorporated. And so we're based in Baltimore, but provide nationwide services as it relates to resource referral. So we know that as clinicians, it's really hard to find a clinician who might look like you and that you can identify with. And that's really part of the battle to get individuals of color into therapy. And so we hold a database of clinicians across the country to provide access to social workers, counselors, psychiatrists of color that are available and taking clients. And so that's just one arm of all of the work that we do. I'm the director of the Youth and College Division for the Black Mental Health Alliance. And so anything that impacts young people between the ages of 5 and 25, along with their parents, kind of falls under my work. And so back in March, when COVID hit, the Black Mental Health Alliance did an entire town hall called When America Gets the Flu, Black America Gets Pneumonia. And people were kind of looking at us like, what are you talking about? This is only going to be a few weeks. We're going to be back to normal really soon. And we were like, no, that's not the case. We are certain, based upon what we're seeing, that we are going to be home for a bit. And so we had these conversations around, our first one out of the gate was actually around men, women, children. And then we kind of broke it out into those specific buckets and really talked about and how were the children. And so in Kenya, in Africa, there is a group of warriors who their call to action or their call to greeting is, and how are the children? It's not how are you? It's not, what's up? It's not what's going on. It is, and how are the children? And then the response is supposed to be, all the children are well. And so when we think about COVID and we think about this impact that it has had on our entire country, and then therefore it being worse for children of color and people of color, the response right now is not all the children are well. Behavioral health claims have gone up 300% in our country. And so that's just people that are reaching out. And so we know in our communities that individuals usually don't, because of the stigma, like Randy just mentioned. And so children look to their parents for answers during times of uncertainty, during times of stress. And so in this moment, I'm looking to my own mother, like, Ma, what's going on? And she's like, pray about it. I'm like, I have. And so we are, I'm an adult. I'm still processing and looking to my mother for, answers. I'm looking to, my husband and to my pastor for answers, because it's just super uncertain. And so my response in this moment is that, if it is that, white America is getting the flu, Black America is getting pneumonia, I offer that our children, if we don't get this right, will experience long lasting effects, right? Like if you don't treat pneumonia when it hits, your lungs can take a hard hit, and it's extremely hard to come back from, and there can be lasting effects. And so I offer that, we approach kind of this care for mental health for Black children and children of color in this collective care model. So it makes me think about the Freedom Schools model, and how in that model you bring all the children under the oak tree and you have conversation about, life and what needs to happen, but you also provide some math and science and technology and engineering information while they're there, because you're meeting the need. And so as a community, as a school community, as a church community, it is our responsibility to fill in those gaps. And some of those gaps may be exacerbated by emotion, right? So feelings of anxiety, feelings of grief from the things that you didn't get to experience. You didn't get your prom, you didn't get your graduation or your promotion ceremony. You didn't get to experience that birthday party with that friend that you thought was going to be so amazing because of COVID. And so it's okay to feel that way. A lot of times in our communities, the only time we're allowed to feel is at a funeral or at a wedding. And that's, sometimes you might cry at the wedding, you might not, because you might not like who they're marrying, right? Let's be real. And so let's just say that it is okay to feel the feelings, right? It's okay to support your child and say, I don't know what's coming next. I do know that you're safe at home. And as a teacher, teaching virtually or teaching in classroom, you're safe here. This is a safe space. It's okay to feel that way. But we do also know, and I'll close with this, that Black wellness is just different. And so sometimes that anxiety may show up as anger. That depression may show up as anger. That those feelings of loneliness and not really understanding or having answers for what they're going through may show up as anger. And so we must be really mindful about, consistently putting Black children into anger management when they're really feeling other emotions and you've just, stifled them being able to experience those emotions. And so just thinking about considering that and really understanding that it all shows up a little bit differently in our classrooms, in our homes, in our churches. And it's really important for us to be able to care for their mental health, because the answer has to, at some point, be all the children are well.
I love that. Love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Miss Mona Towns.
All right. Thank you. I am excited to be here this evening. My name is Mona Towns. I am the Director of Crisis Services with Integrated Family Services. And we are a provider in Eastern North Carolina. So we provide services. I know some of you guys are in Charlotte today. We are way across on the other end of the state. And a large portion of my career as a social worker has been working with children in crisis. So working with children who may display those disruptive behaviors that Nia was just talking about, where we're really trying to figure out, this is only the tip of the iceberg. What else is going on with this baby? What has happened? What has happened to this child? And I a lot of times, even in my career, and not only in my career, but even in my childhood, mental health wasn't something we talked about. It was not something that, what do you have to be depressed about? You have food, you have somewhere to stay, you have clothes. What do you have to be sad about? But I'm happy that the conversation has completely shifted. Even pre-COVID, I could tell that the conversation was starting to shift with more mental health awareness, more mental health initiatives that were taking place, to now let children know that it is okay. But now let's talk about what resources and what are some things that are available for them. Or talking with parents about how do you create a safe space for your child to be able to talk with you. Well, sometimes that's difficult if the parent, hasn't been allowed a safe space for themselves ever to talk about that. So I really do know, in my career, and even I've heard that, even with suicide, because that's a lot of times with crisis, what I work with, well, that doesn't happen with our kids, well, that's them, that's not us. And to have to talk with parents and educators and, any other professionals, yes, it does happen to our children. And it is increasingly happening to our children. And if we don't create a safe space and allow them to know what they can do with those feelings, with those emotions, we're going to continue to lose our children. One of the services that we provide, and I just want to say, I know, Nia, you talked about, with being able to actually link our children with counselors or with therapists that actually look like them. We are, as an agency, so fortunate to actually have not one, but two Black female psychiatrists within our agency, which is absolutely unheard of in a lot of communities, especially in Eastern North Carolina, where, a child or a parent can, we just relate different. We just relate to someone who, understands our language, our culture a little bit better than someone who may not. But one of the things, even in the services that we provide, and again, my niche is crisis. We've had kids and partnering with the schools with trying to identify what is it that we can do to save lives, to save the lives of children. So one of the services that we provide is mobile crisis management. And every county, whatever county you are in, every county in North Carolina has a mobile crisis management provider. And if you are unsure of who your mobile crisis management provider is, I encourage you to reach out to your local management entity, your MCO, because they will be able to help you with that. But with Mobile Crisis, we have partnered for years with schools to be able to provide that immediate crisis intervention, crisis response, to be able to help with those school social workers, school counselors, school administrators, to be able to support those students and be able to provide resources for them so that they can continue, they can come back to school tomorrow, so that they can continue to come back. So we've been able to do that. Well, what we also noted was with mobile crisis, very similar to a therapist or going to see a doctor, they had to have parents' permission. We have to have consent from a parent in order to provide treatment, the unless, and I won't go into the unless, but of course, unless they are at risk of harm to themselves. But what we identified was the volume of 13 to 18-year-olds that we were serving surpassed many of the other population groups that we were serving. What we then identified was, if we are serving this large group of 13 to 18-year-olds, well, they have an adult who's calling in to make that initial call. What is it that we can do to provide a resource to those students so that they don't have to have that parent resource or that parent's permission to contact us? So we offer a service called Crisis Chat. So if you've ever heard of the National Text Line, it's very similar, but it is a crisis chat service where a child, an adult, a teacher, an administrator, a parent can go on and simply provide some online emotional support. And the individuals, as we call them, chat specialists, you know, they are, you know, either licensed professionals or qualified professionals who are just able to help and provide that type of support that doesn't require that face-to-face involvement, does not even require picking up a telephone. So we have been excited to partner with schools, and we've had schools to actually include the information on their robocalls, and I know different school districts call them different things, where we have been able to promote and make sure that students, parents, you know, teachers, the community in general are aware of what resources are available. Oftentimes that I have found that sometimes we just don't know that the resources are there, that sometimes they are there, but we just may not know that they are. And our goal is to really make sure that we get that information out. One of our goals has been to make sure that information for Crisis Chat is included on all of the county district websites and included, embedded in the apps. Pitt County Schools were actually embedded in their school app, so that that student or that parent that has that app that may feel like they need some immediate support, they're able to connect right there with their phone. So we're just, you know, my goal is to make sure that, you know, now switching, you know, with COVID, like we said, a lot of these services now are through Zoom, through telephone, or some other type of telemed platform. And I don't foresee this going away. I almost foresee that these types of platform for students being able to receive services, or individuals just being able to engage in behavioral health or mental health services, this is going to continue. This is almost going to be our new norm for a lot of the services that we provide. But even as a parent, my motto right now in my house has been, the struggle is real. As a parent who is trying to work and trying to make sure that my children are emotionally well, and my husband is emotionally well as well, it can be very challenging. We had a PTA meeting last night, and of course, you know, they go through what else, you know, does anyone else have any information? And that was one of the things that I wanted to suggest. We have to identify ways that we can ensure the emotional well-being of the students, the parents, the teachers, and the administrators, and being able to identify what is it that we can do. So that's again, crisis is my niche, working with students or working with individuals who are suicidal. Again, I just, you know, a lot of times we don't recognize or admit that those things, they really do touch our community.
Thank you so much. The struggle is real.
It is real.
It's real. It is real, showing up. Yeah. All right, next we're going to go to Tammy Broadway. You're on mute.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Tammy Broadway. I'm with the National Alliance of Mental Illness Charlotte. I'm also a licensed professional counselor. And some trends that I'm seeing with students now in therapy are anxiety, stress, feeling unsupported, disconnected, because the school was their safety place. At least that was one place they could go during the day, and they don't have that. We're virtual now, but you know, that's not the same environment as being with your peers, actually being able to go to the teacher, ask a question. What I try to do with the students is try to find meaningful connections and connecting what they're doing to real life experiences. That's something educators can do as well. The students might not understand Shakespeare, but they understand Nipsey Hussle or different rappers. How can you connect your lessons to that and engage the students more? Because now we're going to have to do more than we have in the past. COVID, the effects of it, I see this 10 years, like Mona said, it's not going to go away, especially for children of color. Many of our students don't even have the basic resources, internet devices. We're struggling with that. So how will they be successful in school? So they have anxiety. So what I tell them, just breathe, just pause and reset. Take a moment to do that. Also, adverse childhood experiences. You can do a living study with our students now. For those of you who don't know, it's when students experience toxic stress or they're impacted by their environments. So many of our students, if you look at them, especially inner city, they're impacted by what's going on in their homes, parents losing their jobs, having COVID, multiple siblings in the home, as well as I'm trying to graduate or stay on track. Charlotte Mecklenburg has purpose lessons for K through 12 to provide social emotional supports for students for 45-minute blocks, which will be helpful. But what do we need to do beyond that? I think this could be a conversation to have further. NAMI has a program called Ending the Silence. We offer that free. Mr. Brinson is also trained in that. And what that does is recognize the soft signs of mental health for students, like what are some things you need to look for? Unfortunately, our students are choosing suicide to take away as a way out. 1 in 5 individuals in this country are impacted by mental health. This was before COVID. So what is it now? And I think when you see something odd with your student, check in with them like, hey, how are things going? Send a message. I have some students now that I send them a morning text to, like, hey, how's it going? How's school? You know, just pre-populated text just to check in to say that someone cares about them. Often the schools use Bloom's taxonomy for student success, like this is the model. But unfortunately, so many of our students are stuck on Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the bottom. Is their safety met? Basic needs. And if they're not, how do we expect for them to go up into the higher levels? We do have resources here. I guess, Mr. Brinson, we can get a list together for the participants. Mobile Crisis is an excellent resource. If you know a kid who is experiencing stress, you can pass that on to the parent. Also, Cardinal, if you go to their website, they have resources for all types of mental health, housing, other services our students might need. But I thought about that today. This could be 10 years before we actually recover from COVID because we're not out of it now. So will it be this year that we actually return back to that, the safety of the building for some of our students? So that's where I am. And I just try to meet the students where they are or my clients where they are and just say, hey, it's okay. Don't feel pressured by doing all these other things. Just try to make it through today. And then tomorrow is a new day. And that helps. And I think with educators, that's the same thing. If a student's behind or they're late to class, is it always their fault? I try to ask, what's going on with you? Or how can I help you, instead of coming at the student in a way that they think that it's their fault because they'll shut down. So those are some things I would like to share, and I'll share the resources for the community with Mr. Brinson to share out later on. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And so, Dr. Burton, David, Dr. Burton.
Yes. How's everyone doing today? I'm so glad that I'm here. My phone is dying, so I'm trying to make sure I can get some juice. COVID issues, sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, I feel like no one's responding. Yes, everyone can hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Yes.
So my name is David Burton. My company is nationally. We've done work in Haiti, Africa, Paris, America, you know, domestically all around. So we provide business solutions, trainings, and mental health. And, this is a very interesting time, and I want to thank all of the panelists for being here and all the audience members for all the educators for listening in. In Pittsburgh, where I originated from South Carolina, but professionally, that's where I built my organization. We also started a charter school called Penn Hills Charter School of Entrepreneurship. So I really have an affinity for educators. And so I guess a lot of my feedback today is going to really be, putting a challenge to educators to really get grounded. In therapy, there's an intervention that I use. I have a holistic service delivery. So we're a non-medication model, even though I think medication in psychiatry has its place, because I think, that's the reason that God Almighty put it in place. I usually want to use holistic interventions first before I go to a medication model. And so there's an intervention that we use called grounding, where you take your shoes off, you get barefooted, and you just walk in the grass. And the reason this is beneficial, because when you get your feet connected to the earth, because a lot of times we don't really connect with the earth because we have shoes on, we're in a car, we're in a building. And so doing this helps break up free radicals that are within your system, and it helps break up inflammation, muscle tension, depression, anxiety. I mean, you can Google it, it has a lot of benefits. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think if we want to really address mental health during this COVID pandemic phase in life, we're really going to have to get grounded. And how can educators ground themselves, figuratively, without using grass? And one way, I have a podcast, and if any of you guys are into, the audience members or the panelists, feel free to go look at it. It's called Global Talk. A couple of episodes on there. But I give some tips, and I'll give a couple of those today, that educators and parents need to start thinking about when we're, now having this new functioning of how we provide education. I'm really concerned about what our academic success looks like, not in 2020, but 2023, because, I have clients right now who kids, mom's at work, who's managing, who's logging on to the computer, and who's managing the quality of that log on and the quality of information they're getting when they're having to navigate this by themselves and deal with the frustrations of, just look at some of the issues we had, and we're all competent adults just trying to get on this computer system today, and, my phone's dying and somebody can't log in. And, imagine if you were 12, 4, 3, or 8, trying to navigate that. That's very frustrating. And then mom's having to go to work, or dad's having to go to work, or there's a furlough. A lot of university professors are getting furloughed with no income. So there's a lot of issues going on. So what I think is going to be very key during this time is that we're going to have to be more organized than ever before. And that can be stressful in itself, having to organize yourself. So I would, encourage people to look into meditation, and if you don't want to get all deep with it, take 20 minutes out of your day, take your family, your kids, go outside and take a walk. Just take a walk, get in nature, and I'm not being funny, hug a tree, put your hand in some dirt to recenter yourself so you can come home and start organizing yourself. Because if you're going to be working from home, if we have that privilege to work from home, you're going to have to be able to manage your workload and the workload of the student, right? And the teacher is going to really have to enhance their collaboration with the parents, because now, this is taking teaching to a new level. For example, what about our kids with IEPs? A lot of the family members have not had to manage their child and their educational academic difficulties, because that's usually what the teachers address and handle in the academic setting. Now the parent is having to deal with those learning disabilities at home, and they don't have the skill set to deal with it, and probably don't even know what is the issue, what is on the IEP, what are my kids' learning difficulties? Because as educators, we know that a lot of times those parents come to those meetings, but they don't get copies of the IEP. The IEP is not signed, the IEP is not followed, and so how can we really, if our students are on IEPs, make this a real live document, and the educator is connecting with the parents to say, hey, this is your kid's IEP. This is usually how we address those issues, and giving the parents some tips to help navigate that education while they're at home, right? Also, that's going to require having a lot of structure. That puts a lot of burning on the teacher because they got to do a little extra work, but this is an extra time, right? So we're going to have to take it to the next level to really build strong communication networks. You know, when you look at trees are able to function because they have a strong network underneath the ground that we don't see. They communicate with each other. They have these roots. And so we're going to have to function like these roots and really start communicating and connecting. When it comes to scheduling, parents are going to really want to start really being organized as far as saying, hey, we eat breakfast at this time, because school provides structure for kids. Structure reduces anxiety. One of the questions is, how do we reduce the anxiety? How do we reduce this depression? Structure, groundedness. That's why I gave you that example of groundedness. We have to feel grounded. Right now, when you watch TV, nothing feels grounded. You know what I mean? You want to like drop everything and run out the house. Ania said she called her mom like, Mom, what are we going to do? And Mom's like, pray about it. It's like, man, you know, you start questioning, with prayer help? You know, like, Jesus, just come on and get it over with, right? So we're going to have to ground it. You need to start have a schedule. You're going to have to wake up at the same time. This is for the parents. You're going to have to the parents listening. You're going to have to start waking up at the same time, providing breakfast at the same time, like a real structured schedule, lunch at the same time, a break at the same time, you know, class at an appropriate time, so you can have the time that the kid is in class, and you'll have a time that you can do your work if you're working from home. If you're going to be not working from home and you're working out in the field, you know, you got to realize that that's going to provide anxiety for your kids, because they know that COVID is happening. They're going to be worried about the safety of their parents. So you want to make sure that you're reiterating, maybe every night, having a process conversation with your family to say, how's everybody doing today? How are you feeling? I'm safe, I'm home, I did all my precautions, I wore my mask, I used my hand sanitizer. These are the things I did. So it helps reduce the anxiety of your kids who are at home and parents have to go to work, and they know that you're being safe out in the public so they can feel safe at home. But making sure that if you're going to be at work and not home, that you put a schedule in place and that you check in throughout the day to make sure the kids are on that schedule and following it. If you're at home, then you want to make sure you implement that structure, because that's what, you know, education provides, structure. And I just reiterate once again, the teachers are going to really, you know, start having those pre-conversations. Maybe you once a week you touch base with all your student parents to say, hey, how's everything going? You know, are there any resources you need? Are there any difficulties that you're seeing that your kid is dealing with the lesson plan that I'm sending? Whether that's through email, whether you're doing a Zoom call with all the parents to get on board that you do once a month or once every 2 weeks. But I guess the message that I want to send home is, in every situation, you're going to want to implement some good grounded structure. And that's going to help with the reduction of anxiety. It's going to help with the reduction of the depression. And one of the questions was, well, how do you know the symptoms? Well, I think if you build communication within your family, within the people that you're working with, your educators, your administration, you'll be able to identify these issues by conversation. You got to have check-ins. A lot of times we don't check in with our family because we're too busy doing life, right? We got to get the food cooked. We got to get this. We got to get ready for bed. We got to get, you know, so there's never really a check-in like, hey, mom, how are you? Hey, son, how are you feeling? You know, regardless of your academics, how are you today? How did you deal with, were you stressed out today? Were you happy today? What made you happy today? You know, having a 10-minute conversation that you structure in every day to check in with your family, and even teachers, making sure, if you're an administrator, if you're a principal, checking in with your staff, because your teachers are overwhelmed. And, you know, and educators on this call can attest to that. They're overwhelmed. This is new to them. You know, some educators like that socialization. That's why they got in the field. They want that person connection. And this has, you know, robbed them of that opportunity, you know, and put it into a virtual situation. So checking in with the educators. So that is some tips that I think is necessary to just ground, connect, and really strong communication works between the teacher and the parents. And the parents, you really gonna have to take it to the next level of structuring your day so you can provide groundedness for that student. Anybody can call me on this phone. My number is 412-626-2003. My email is globalmap01@gmail. I'm sure they'll have this listed somewhere, hopefully, prayerfully. But if not, you can write that down. And I'm just glad to be here. And I think this conversation is definitely needed.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yes, all the resources that you're getting, we're going to put them all together and send them out to everyone, and also post them as well, so they'll be available for others to see. So thank you very much, Dr. Burton. And we have one more panelist, and this Dr. Massey. We're going to go ahead and let you get started.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me here this evening. This is a hard job to follow, this group of panelists, but I noticed that in the conversation, we are all mentioned, everyone who spoke has mentioned that mental health is not something that we really talk about in the community of color, you know, and that with COVID being present, it has brought on more and more stress and strain on the family and the individuals. And then in addition to that, as Randolph said earlier, we also have the social issues that are presenting that's also causing stress within the community. And many of those issues were already causing stress, and now it's well known that it causes stress, and it's multiplied by 1,000. When I was in grad school, I once wrote a paper, and I said that if the primary group, the research indicated, if the primary group in society is in a storm, then the Black woman has been shipwrecked. And when you think of the fact that so many of the families are being led by women, not that they're not supported by men and fathers, but many of them are being led by women. And one of the things, one of the issues that we have with women, be that mom, grandma, auntie, is that women by nature, and the research also indicates this, that women by nature are primary caretakers. You know, that's what they like to do. This is what society has groomed them to do. So we have to take that in consideration. And then we go on throughout this process, and then we have what? We have COVID fatigue. And believe you me, I have COVID fatigue. I am sick of being in the house. And when you get COVID fatigue, you start thinking about and rationalizing why you shouldn't be in the house. Well, it's gonna go on forever. They don't have no cure for it. They don't have no shot. I'm just gonna have to get used to this. And then you begin to do things that place you at risk, at higher risk. And we're already at higher risk, people of color. It's already indicated that we're already at higher risk. So now we have COVID fatigue, and now we're rethinking. And it's not just us, it's all people are having COVID fatigue. But of course, it's gonna hit us harder because we're already being hit harder. So we see all these students in the high schools that opened up in the country, as well as the colleges. And they're out there and they're doing what they do because, hey, we're gonna die from something. So they're rationalizing now. So they're out there and people are saying what? They're condemning them and they're attacking them. And they're also continuing to attack the people who are forced to be out there. Nobody's really out there. I've known many people, even people with degrees, who work in fields that are essential workers. And they're not in the hospital. They're in big box stores. They're in professions that require them to still go out. They didn't just say, oh, I'm excited. I'm ready to go out there. But they go out there every day. One of them mentioned to me, they said, you know, it's gonna be a divide between the people who were allowed to stay home and the people who are still out there, because we're gonna look at the world differently. We're not afraid to go out. We'll go to a restaurant. We'll do this. We'll go out without masks because we do it every day. In saying that, I want people to be able to recognize that some of the things that our parents will do will seem to be negligent, that they're placing themselves at undue risk. But it is really because of the environment and the situation that they're in that they're placing themselves in undue risk. When we see our kids in class and there's a lot of chaos going on, there's a lot of noise, it's not a choice. It is a place in your life that this is what you have. So we need to help them give them some ways of how to deal with that instead of talking about changing that, because there's some things that you can do and there's some things you cannot. And since we don't have a wand and we can't change the world, then we need to listen to our students and listen to their concerns and allow them to vent. We also need to allow the parents to vent and just listen without interrupting them and just allowing them to process it, because sometimes that's all they want, is to be able to talk to someone. We need to be able to help them problem solve. And that's one of the things that we can do. I know it was mentioned earlier about the classroom lessons. That's something that can be dealt with in those lessons, problem solving. How do you problem solve? How do you deal with your emotions? How do you address those emotions? Those are all things that we can really deal with in those 45-minute lessons that Ms. Broadway talked about earlier. Now, one of the things, fortunately, within CMS, we have a lot of resources. We still need some. I'm not saying that we have everything that we need, but we do have a lot of resources. And one of the things that we have in many of our schools is restorative practices. And that's the use of circles. And those circles can be used just to develop community. We must redefine our communities within our schools. They look different. They're not wrong, they're not bad, they just look different. So we need to be able to redefine that. And we can use those circles to do that in the morning and in the afternoon. You can also let the students be a part of that process. And when people are a part of a process, it's easier to accept. We need to have them have a voice in this because they're an important part and they must be able to participate. Anytime you give them a voice and encourage participation, we need them in the classroom. We want to encourage their voice so that they can participate. Restorative circles is a great way to do that. We also have Check and Connect. Some of the schools have been trained, have people who have been trained with Check and Connect. If you have Check and Connect, it is simply a marvelous way to create a mentor system that allows us people on campus to actually continue to maintain contact. It's one of the strategies that's really, really easy to transfer over to the virtual environment because it's something that you can use through text, telephone. You just want to make sure you reach out, that you understand what's going on, that they know that they have someone that they can talk to. It also encourages the parents to connect with us. We really need to work with the parents. We also need to work with our staff. Everybody has been impacted by COVID. No one has been missed. So in doing so, when you have those circles, it requires everyone to be involved. When you have Check and Connect, it requires an adult and a student to establish a relationship. Those relationships can also include parents or the guardian. So whenever we do anything that gives people a voice, again, that increases engagement. And engagement is very important to come to class. They must come to class in order to learn. We also have mindfulness. It was mentioned earlier. We really need to start thinking about that and really using that as an approach of how to get grounded. We have to be able to learn the problem solving, to control our thoughts. That's one of the things that we do. So in saying that, CMS has also had staff, counselors, social workers, psychologists trained in trauma therapy or trauma interventions. That is going to be rolling out this year too. So with trauma, they've already been thinking and being very progressive in their thinking and starting this process. So with COVID being in the place, we know everybody has been traumatized to some degree. Some people may not recognize it. As someone said earlier, it might be 10 years before someone really recognizes that, hey, this really impacted my life. But we can start the process now if we start thinking about those strategies. And many of those strategies really involve listening. Anyone can listen. Allow them to vent, talk about it, process it, so that you can help them develop a plan to address it. We really can't address it if we don't listen. Listening will give us some keys. And the many of the things that were talked about earlier, such as suicide, what's going on in the house, is there some other issues, some other social issues going on in the house? How will we know if we don't make that time to address it? Part of the care in school process encourages that teachers have one-on-one conversations with their students. Building that in, I know it's not as easy as it sounds just to say build in one-on-one time. But if you can text, you can call, some people you'll email, it will look different from student to student. How do you do that? and as well as the parents online. It was mentioned earlier. I encourage you to do that. Some form of check-in every day. Even if it seems like you're getting on their nerves. Believe me, I have a 27-year-old and I get on his nerves all the time. I call and say, what's going on? How are you? And he just holds the phone and I just hold the phone too. Because I'm not gonna give up till I find out what's going on. I would rather find out before something happens than after, because everyone is at risk. No one is safe from mental health issues. We're all stressed. So in talking about that with COVID fatigue, we have to think about our staff. We really cannot help others until we help ourselves. So when we start talking about mindfulness and looking at how to use that, deep breathing, meditation, taking that moment to have that cup of tea in the morning, taking that moment to sit and just think and look at the flowers, finding out what works for you. It looks different from everybody. Find out what it is so you can take care of yourself so that you can help others. So it's very important that we really start thinking about and using many of the tools that we have to address trauma. How does it look? Resiliency. We've also had that training. So we're talking about, we know that trauma exists. We know it's widespread with all the social issues that we address, things that are currently happening as well as COVID. So we know we've been trying to get prepared. Can you truly be totally prepared? No. We too need to turn to each other. I try to call somebody at least once a day and just have a conversation about how are you doing? What's going on? They say, I hear from you more now than ever. You will probably continue to hear from me more now than ever, because now I see the very importance of checking in with people every day, because as my eldest once told me, in a blink of an eye, I now know it is in a blink of an eye. If you have any needs, parents or teachers, and support for yourself as well as your scholars, if we help you, we help those scholars. Always reach out to your social workers, your counselors, and your psychologists on campus. We can be that first bridge to help link you with community services. Thank you.
Wow. This is some powerful information, powerful stuff. And from based off of what I'm hearing is, we have a motto in NCAE is that we're in this together. And I feel that that's a lot of what's been said. And we do have a few questions, but what I'm going to do is give you all a chance, the opportunity I'm thinking about a part 2. We're going to be able to share some resources. I'm going to give you all an opportunity just to anything that you have that you want to leave with the participants. I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that. Some of the things that I've heard that I really want to explore more, and maybe we can do this in the future, is stigma, Black wellness, toxic stress, mobile crisis, a lot of those things and boundaries, like, when is too much or too little, boundaries for educators in getting involved with family. But stigma was something that really stood out. So what I'm going to do is, because we're kind of pressed up against the time, I'm just going to give each of you an opportunity, and we can just go in the order that we started with. Just give each of you an opportunity to leave anything that you want the participants to know.
Well, for me, I just want to reiterate that this is a time in COVID-19, even before COVID-19, in terms of people of color and their communities have been left behind, and that COVID-19 have exacerbated all of the needs. And that, as I listened to my fellow panelists, I thought about restorative practices, and about the major thing is about relationships, and keeping those relationships going and strong, and improving upon, especially teachers, staff members, faculty, improving upon the outreach of relationships with your students, but also taking care of yourselves. Because that's the thing, as a counselor, school counselor, many times you have to take a moment and breathe, and as Dr. Burden said, get grounded and reground yourself. So I think that there are some communities that have less resources than others, but I think that according to where you are, that just outreach and a little investigation. You know, I've discovered that you can Google about everything and find about everything you want, and that keeping our future generations, helping them address their mental health, their anxiety, their trauma that they're experiencing, not only from COVID, but from the social unrest in this nation, that it is going to be paramount to making sure that 2, 3, 5, 10 years after COVID, that we are still on course to making sure that our students are successful and our students of color are, you know, meet the demands of the 21st century and beyond.
I think I just leave you all with Dr. King penned a book in 1963 called Why We Can't Wait. And in the beginning, in the introduction of that book, he juxtaposes a boy from the city of Harlem and a young girl from the South, I believe it was Alabama. And he talks about why we can't wait through the eyes of those children. And so as we do this work, as we continue to think about the young people that we serve on a daily basis, I encourage you to continue to do the work. Give yourself some grace for sure, but continue to do the work because this is so critical, especially living in the age of a double pandemic, where we're looking at COVID as well as the racial unrest that is being played full out on our TVs. And so you can definitely interact with the Black Mental Health. Follow us on all social media, and I'll put our information in the chat box, but it was definitely a pleasure to.
I do want to almost send out a challenge to all of the educators to make sure that you do know who those providers are and that you have a relationship with those providers, even to the point that you can pick up the phone and, you know, say, hey, walk me through this. Hey, this child, you know, has this insurance, or I don't know what this child has, but I do think it's important, you know, to make sure that we are building relationships with behavioral health providers in the community, as well as school districts, as really a partnership, because we're serving the same children. We have the same goal. Oftentimes the priority may be different, but and it may not be different at this point. The priority probably is the mental well-being of that student, even over the educational needs of that student. So if you know, I do encourage everyone to identify who that mobile crisis service provider is for, you know, that you have. So it's not that this is a resource I have to go and look for. You know that. Know what types of online emotional supports are available for students. Again, those things that if they're struggling at 2 o'clock in the morning, they have something that they can reach out to and use. They have some type of connection that they will have. Miss Lawrence Davis, yes, my office is, I work out of the Greenville office. I did see where you asked that. Another thing, one of the things that we do on our Facebook page is every Sunday night, and I don't know about you, but almost it has started for me Sunday night. You know, I get this lump in my throat, my stomach is starting, like, what, I won't say what I want to say. What does the week hold for me this week? But what we have started doing over the past, I want to say we've done this for 3 weeks now. On Sunday nights, we send out a message, a personalized message with a different topic. And it really is to educators, it's to parents, basically saying, you know, the struggle is real, but you got this. Let's identify, you know, different things each week, you know, that we can say, yes, we did it, and we can say who we got through another week, and we're going to get through another week together. So this is something, it's, you know, something again that we've just started doing. It's just a few minutes. on Sunday nights, where it is just a recorded video where we're talking and really providing that encouragement, motivation, almost like a cheerleader, but we're not cheerleaders, but just really to provide that to parents, teachers, educators, again, to say we got this.
Hi, my message would be, I'm always about holistic care, taking care of your mind, body, and spirit. That's for our students, even for ourselves. Working in COVID has been more challenging for me in my 20 years of education. It's more work, and it's really about making those connections with your families to see the students succeed. What I send them, Mona, every week, I'm like, push through. I'm like, push through, you got this. So that's what I tell them. Or I'll send some little motivational quote, like push through and do this, and it motivates the students. I also host weekly lunch and learns. Parents and kids can drop in, and that's a way to build those connections too. And just have a safe place to talk. Something's wrong with my schedule. I'm having problems with this teacher. And we started that in the spring during COVID, and it was helpful just because some kids felt like no one cared about them. But here you have this group of people, it was an admin and myself meeting to support the students. So I'm all about take care of yourself, self-care, grounding, and you have to take care of your whole body, not just one part. That's what I'd like to leave you with today.
Am I next? Yes. So thank you, Ms. Dr. Broadway, Ms. Broadway. I definitely agree. I believe in holistic health. And what I'm going to say, my last words is that I want to thank God. I'm a Christian, I believe in God, so I'll use that. I want to thank God for COVID, because I think COVID is a major crisis. And one thing we know, that when you want change, change usually only comes when there's a major crisis. And one thing about society was, since there was no major crisis, there were crises in certain communities, but everyone was not interested in certain crises because it didn't affect them. But COVID is something that has affected everyone. And usually when you want a global change, you need a global crisis, right? And so I am thankful for this change. And I think that this crisis has really brought families together. It's really made us really rethink what is important. It's really made us refocus about how we spend our money, how we buy our food, how we connect with who we connect with, what's really important in life. And so I think, in trauma, they got this thing called post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth is when there's a trauma, either you can be traumatized or you take the trauma and you grow from it. And so I'm excited about looking at the growth that's going to come from this traumatic moment. And that growth is going to come with I would say, holistic understanding. The more you really tapping into your spirituality, the more you're tapping into your communication, the more you're really figuring out who you are and what you want from society, you're going to be able to grow from this situation. Parents are now having to really understand what their kids are learning in school, understanding what their kids' difficulties are, and seeing it live and at 5, if you will, and kind of really understanding some of the struggles that educators are having, because now they're getting to see it. And I think that's going to really bring a new synthesis and not have people functioning in silos, meaning I'm over here and you're over there, and you just take my kid and educate my kid, and I'm at home and I'm just this parent, and really bringing the reality, a reality check to say, hey, there's a system for a reason, and we need to use this system to the best of its ability. So I'm hoping that parents, even though it's stressful, can really see the blessing in this moment, can really see the fact that they can really now spend more time with the kids that they love, the people that they love. Teachers can now really, start using creative ways to communicate. Yes, it's a little, it requires a little more, but there's many people let's look at Chad Boswick. This dude had colon cancer and did like 10 films, so I don't want to hear that you can't do it. You can do it. There's people who are doing a lot more with a lot less. So just really go deep within, find that warrior within, whether that's through prayer, whether that's through meditation, whatever you use to center yourself. Call me. Like I said, I travel around the world, so and I've been doing Skype since 2008. I was doing teletherapy before teletherapy was cool. So you can always call me. I never go to sleep if you really have a crisis moment. 412-626-2003, and hey, just be blessed. Go outside, look at the sun, touch the grass, and it's gonna be all right. We're gonna be okay. And really take your family to the next level. Decide what you want your family to, what's your family agenda, what's your family value, and really get structured. Structure is going to be the key. That's what I want. That's my word. Structure is the key. Structure yourself.
Okay, so I'd like to close out by saying our thoughts control everything. So it's really important that we really start focusing on our thoughts. How do we problem solve? How do we look at those things? It's all in how you label it. I can look at a glass and say it's half full, and someone will say it's half empty. One thing that we do know is our thoughts will control how we interact with the world. And a part of interacting with the world is interacting with other people and having those resources. In the old days, they had those circles where they quilting circles and canon circles and canon groups and all those things. And they were all used for a way of communicating, of developing relationships that support each other so that you would know how to survive, what to do in the world. And I think COVID has given us an opportunity to really look at our circles and redefine those circles and rebuild those circles. And I think it's a crucial part of education that we build in those circles and redefine our communities and have our students help us do that and redefining our communities and redeveloping how we interact with each other, because it's going to be forever change from this point on. It's going to be forever change how we do things. So it's really about listening so that we can build relationships, and we using those circles and groups in order to do that. Make those connections, build it strong. And my family, we would say, it's time to rally the wagons. We're coming, and we're coming to support. And so that's what we need to do. Rally those wagons, let them know they have support, let them know that change is coming, let them know that they are part of that change. And a very important part of that change is our students. They are the future. More so than ever, we need to let them know. Rally your wagons. We're here to support you. Build your support systems. It may not be who you think it is. That's not important. You define it. Build that support, and through that, we can make change, everlasting change.
This has been amazing. I really do appreciate everybody and the resources you share. Again, I don't want it to stop here. I do feel like we need to continue the conversation and explore some of these other topics. And I'm so grateful that you all accepted the invitation to participate. I appreciate the attendees. And again, thank you all so much. And we'll be in touch, reaching out to everybody. Again, this has been you will definitely hear from me again. This has been great. I like the network that we're building. So just by some of the responses we're getting, that some people have been helped, and they're going to be able to move forward and rally the wagons. And we're going to make sure that the children are okay and take care of the struggles and be grounded. So we just want to make sure that we continue and don't just stop at discussion and get to the work. So again, one thing I do want us all to remember is if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't take care of others. So I'm grateful for each of you, and thank you so much for participating.
Thank you. And good night.
And,
Be global, stay global.
those of my local will be proud of me because I actually was able to talk without hitting the mute button. I mastered the mute.
You did well.
Hey, I enjoyed meeting everyone here. I will contact everyone by email. Thank you for allowing me to join.
Yes. We're gonna stay.
Nice meeting
That was great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Absolutely.